T.S. Eliot is one of the most important poets to not only American literary history, but world history as well. Many critics say that all poetry after Eliot is either in direct imitation of him or in opposition to what he had to say. Eliot was born to an aristocratic family and was well educated. He received his bachelor degree from Harvard in about 3 years, and his master's took another year. He also was educated at the Sorbonne in Paris. In England, he met Ezra Pound, who was to have a great deal of influence on him, particularly his early poetry. Ezra Pound is a very important literary figure as well. He married a woman named Vivian Heywood while he was in England, a person in direct contrast to him in personality, where Eliot was a rather reserved individual. Vivian was a very exuberant individual, also suffered from a mental illness of some sort. He converted to the Anglican Church and became a British citizen after some time of being in England, and he would eventually stop writing poetry. He won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1948. In addition to his serious poetry, Eliot was to write a number of plays. Most of his plays were composed after he had pretty much quit writing poetry. He was also an influential critic of literature and culture. He also wrote the book Old Possum's Book of Practical Cats, which includes a number of um, poems that are for children, even though he himself had no children. You might know this as the basis for the musical Cats. What one finds in Eliot's poetry are allusions to great and oftentimes obscure works. Eliot is probably one of the only poets I recommend that you pay close attention to the footnotes for. He uses the dramatic narrative, much like the predecessor Robert Browning. The major difference is that in much of Eliot's narratives, the drama is an internal drama, as we find particularly in the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock and portions of The Wasteland and Journey of the Magi. There is a certain musicality to his poetry. He was influenced a great deal by the music that he listened to and the music that was around him. There were the jazz rhythms in the early poetry, which influenced much of the first poems Eliot published, and a great deal of classical music in the later poems, four quartets. For example, his last book of poetry was significantly influenced by the music of Beethoven. One oftentimes divides Eliot's poems into his pre-conversion poems and post-conversion poems. What one sees in the pre-conversion poems is the theme of alienation. Uh, Characters or people are alienated from society or alienated from each other or even from their own identities. One also sees a decay of modern society. This is particularly prevalent in The Wasteland. There is a search for order, something that harkens back to Eliot's dissertation for his master's, which had to do with order. Another theme is the falseness of the world, maybe the superficiality of the world, that much of life is mundane. There is an optimism to be found in some of Eliot's early poems, but that oftentimes comes in renunciation, particularly of a kind of Hindu sort of renunciation of the material world. There is death as a theme, but mostly it's an emotional death or a spiritual death. In the post-conversion poems, represented much by Journey of the Magi and the Four Quartets poems, one sees a theme of history as cyclical. Time and history is always in cyclical. There's a sense of what he referred to as the historical present. There is also hope and optimism in the post-conversion poems, even in the uh, dregs of life, that things are not going so well. There's certainly the theme of suffering, suffering as an integral element of life itself, but also of spiritual renewal. There is again the search for order and the sense for transformation that the human body, the human soul, can go through. Thank you very much.